Arizona Territory, 1887. The parched landscape held its breath beneath the merciless summer sun, a testament to the harsh beauty that defined the American Southwest. Here, where mountain ranges cut jagged silhouettes against impossibly blue skies, Delilah Sutton found herself abandoned, her water canteen nearly empty, her wagon wheel irreparably broken, and her stubborn pride still intact. At 22 years old, Delilah had learned early that the frontier granted no special favors to women. Her golden blonde hair, now escaping its practical braid in wisps that framed her sun-flushed face, caught the light as she knelt beside the broken wheel. Her calico dress, once a cheerful blue, had faded to the color of distant mountains after months of frontier living. "Mother always said my determination would be my undoing," she muttered, pushing back a strand of hair with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of dirt across her cheek. The truth was, Delilah Sutton believed in a simple philosophy: relying on others only invited disappointment. Her father had abandoned their family when she was 12. Her fiancé had died of fever just weeks before their wedding 3 years ago. Even her brother, who had convinced her to journey west to their new homestead, had been buried beneath Arizona soil less than a month after their arrival. The frontier takes more than it gives, she reminded herself, the mantra that had carried her through the past year of solitary struggle on the small patch of land she now fought to claim as her own. And counting on anyone but yourself is a fool's gamble. 10 miles from town, with the sun climbing higher, Delilah knew she faced a dangerous predicament. Her lips were already cracking from thirst, and the broken wagon wheel meant she couldn't continue to the creek as planned. She could abandon her supplies and walk, but looters would surely find her wagon before she could return. The sound of approaching hoofbeats sent her scrambling for the rifle her brother had taught her to shoot. Bandits frequented these trails, preying on vulnerable travelers. Delilah positioned herself behind the wagon, weapon raised, her heart hammering against her ribs. The rider who appeared was not what she expected. He sat tall upon a magnificent pinto horse, his straight black hair falling just past his shoulders. He wore buckskin leggings and a light cotton shirt, with a red band tied around his forehead. At perhaps 25 years of age, his features were striking: high cheekbones, a straight nose, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. An Apache warrior, she realized, noting the distinctive style of his moccasins and the knife sheathed at his side. Delilah kept her rifle steady, despite the tremble in her arms. Relations between settlers and the Apache had been strained for decades, with violence on both sides creating deep wounds of distrust. "That is not the way to greet someone who means no harm," he said in perfect English, his voice deep and calm. He made no move to dismount, keeping his hands visible. "How do I know what you mean?" Delilah called back, cursing the slight quaver in her voice. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "If I meant harm, I would not have approached from the open trail where you could see me coming." Logical, but Delilah wasn't ready to lower her weapon. "What do you want?" "Nothing. I saw your broken wagon from the ridge." He gestured toward the distant hills. "The heat will be dangerous soon. You need water and shelter." "I have water," she lied, the nearly empty canteen hanging heavy at her side. The Apache studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes seeming to see through her deception. "I am Takoda Cochise, son of Running Wolf. My people camp beyond that rise. We could repair your wheel, give you water." "I cannot accept your help," she said to the Apache chief, and then their eyes met. Something unexpected passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of a similar stubbornness or shared understanding of what it meant to survive in this unforgiving land. Takoda dismounted in one fluid motion, keeping his distance. "Then I will leave you to die of thirst. It will be painful. Your tongue will swell. Your mind will begin to see things that are not there. Eventually, you will fall unconscious, and the vultures will circle before you draw your last breath." Her rifle wavered. "You have a gift for persuasion," she said dryly. A genuine smile spread across his face, transforming his serious expression. "I studied at the white man's school in Santa Fe for 3 years. My teachers said the same." Despite herself, Delilah felt her resolve weakening. The sun was relentless, and she knew the dangers of the desert better than most. Still, she hesitated, remembering the newspaper stories of conflict between settlers and tribes. "Why would you help me? Your people and mine are not friends." Takoda's expression grew solemn. I judge each person by their actions, not by the actions of others who share their appearance. Would you have me hate all white women because one stole from my sister at the trading post? His logic disarmed her more effectively than any threat could have. Slowly, Delilah lowered her rifle. My name is Delilah Sutton. Delilah, he repeated, the syllables sounding musical in his accent. Will you now accept my help? She looked at her broken wagon, at the vast expanse of harsh country surrounding them, and at the dwindling water in her canteen. Pride had its place, but not at the cost of survival. Yes, she said finally. I will accept your help. Little did Delilah know that this moment, this reluctant acceptance of kindness from a stranger, would challenge everything she believed about dependency, trust, and the capacity of her heart to heal. Takoda's camp was nothing like the primitive settlement Delilah had imagined. Several well-constructed dwellings formed a small community near a spring-fed creek that created a haven of green amidst the arid landscape. Women worked at various tasks, children played under the watchful eyes of elders, and several men were constructing what appeared to be a new dwelling. Your people live here permanently? Delilah asked as Takoda led her horse, which now pulled her partially dismantled wagon. For now, the reservation is 3 days' ride north, but the agent there takes the best supplies for himself and sells them in town. Here, we can hunt and grow enough food. His jaw tightened. Until the next time we are forced to move. The bitterness in his voice gave Delilah pause. She had read about the reservations in newspapers, but had never considered the reality from the perspective of those forced to live there. A group of children ran toward them, curious about the visitor, but keeping a respectful distance at Takoda's gesture. An older woman approached, her face lined with wisdom and experience. My grandmother, Takoda explained. She speaks little English, but understands more than she pretends. The woman studied Delilah with sharp eyes before speaking rapidly to Takoda in their language. He replied, occasionally gesturing toward the wagon. The older woman nodded and walked away. She has gone to prepare food for you, Takoda explained. 2 men will fix your wheel. It will be ready by morning. Morning. Delilah's anxiety spiked. I cannot stay the night. The repair takes time. The wood must be shaped properly, or it will break again before you reach your destination. His tone was patient but firm. Unless you wish to travel at night through country you do not know, Delilah felt trapped between discomfort and pragmatism. I suppose I have little choice. Takoda's expression softened. Choice is a luxury few of us have in matters of survival, Delilah Sutton. But you will be safe here. As evening approached, Delilah found herself seated by a fire, wrapped in a blanket of surprising softness. Her initial fear had given way to curiosity as she observed the community. Children laughed as they played complicated games. Women worked together, their conversation flowing in a language that sounded like music to her ears. Men returned from hunting or worked on crafts with skilled hands. The most surprising aspect was Takoda himself. As he moved through the camp, she noticed how he stopped to speak with elders, ruffled children's hair affectionately, and consulted with others before making decisions. He was clearly a leader, but not the tyrannical chief of dime novels. You are watching me, he said, bringing her a wooden bowl filled with a fragrant stew. Do I still seem dangerous to you? Delilah accepted the food. Honestly, I'm trying to reconcile the man before me with the stories I've heard about Apache warriors. And what stories are those? He sat across from her, his own bowl in hand. Raids on settlements. Scalping. Torture. She regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth, but Takoda merely nodded. Some are true, some are not. Just as stories of what white soldiers have done to my people. Burning our crops, killing our children, driving us from lands we have lived on for generations. His eyes reflected the firelight. There is cruelty in all people, and goodness too. The difficulty lies in seeing past the stories to the person before you. The wisdom in his words struck her. How much of her own isolation came from the stories she told herself about inevitable abandonment and disappointment. My brother and I came west for a fresh start, she found herself saying. He died of fever 6 weeks after we arrived. Everyone I've ever relied on has left me, one way or another. Takoda was quiet for a moment. That is a heavy burden to carry alone. It's not a burden when it's simply the truth, she countered, but the words lacked conviction. Perhaps. Or perhaps it is a shield you use to protect yourself from further pain. He set aside his empty bowl. Sometimes the strongest act is not to stand alone, but to allow others to stand beside you. Delilah had no response to that. Instead, she changed the subject. You speak as though you've studied philosophy. Where did you learn such perfect English? A shadow crossed his face. When I was 9, soldiers came to our camp. They took all children between 8 and 12 to a school in Santa Fe. They cut our hair, forbade us to speak our language, dressed us in stiff clothes that chafed our skin. His voice remained level, but his hands clenched. They said they would kill the Indian to save the man. Horror filled Delilah. That's barbaric. It is their way. I learned their language, their writing, their God, their customs. I learned so well that when I returned to my people 3 years later, I was a stranger to them. His eyes met hers across the fire. I had to learn again who I was. The vulnerability in his admission touched something in Delilah. Here was someone who understood what it meant to be adrift, to rebuild an identity from fragments. "And who are you now?" she asked softly. A gentle smile curved his lips. "I am Takoda. The name means friend to everyone. I try to honor that meaning, though some days it is difficult, even when a stubborn white woman points a rifle at you." His laugh was unexpected and warming, especially then. That night, sleeping in a small dwelling prepared for her, Delilah dreamed of open skies and running free across the desert, hand in hand with someone whose face remained in shadow. She woke with the strange sensation of having lost something she never possessed. Morning brought new perspective. Watching the community prepare for the day, women grinding corn, men heading out to hunt, children carrying water from the creek, Delilah recognized an efficiency born of necessity and cooperation. No one stood entirely alone. Takoda approached as she helped an older woman hang washing on a line stretched between 2 trees, a task she had volunteered for when gestures and smiles overcame the language barrier. "Your wheel is repaired," he said. "I can help you prepare for your journey after the midday meal." Delilah felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "I should leave as soon as possible. I have animals to tend at my homestead." "Of course." Was that regret in his voice? "I will help you gather your belongings." As they worked to load her supplies, Takoda asked questions about her small farm, what she grew, how she managed alone, whether she had neighbors nearby. His interest seemed genuine, his advice practical. "Winter will be difficult without help," he observed as he secured the last of her provisions. "I'll manage," she replied automatically. "I always do." Takoda studied her face. Managing alone and living well are not the same thing, Delilah Sutton. Before she could respond, shouts erupted from the edge of the camp. A young man raced toward them, calling out in Apache. Takoda's expression hardened as he listened. "What's happening?" Delilah asked, alarmed by the sudden tension. "Soldiers," Takoda replied grimly. "A patrol, heading this way. They are not supposed to be in this area." Fear clutched at Delilah's heart. She had heard stories of confrontations between soldiers and Apache bands, stories that rarely ended well for either side. "What will you do?" "The women and children will move deeper into the hills. The men will stay to speak with the soldiers." His eyes met hers. "You should leave now. It would be better if they did not find you here." The implication was clear. Her presence could be misinterpreted, could escalate an already dangerous situation. Yet the thought of simply driving away, leaving these people who had helped her to face potential violence, struck Delilah as profoundly wrong. "I'm not leaving," she said firmly. "I can speak to them. Explain that you helped me when my wagon broke down." Takoda shook his head. "Some soldiers do not listen to explanations. Then they'll have to arrest a white woman to get to you," she declared, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. "I won't run when you need help, just as you didn't pass me by on the trail." Something shifted in Takoda's expression, surprise giving way to a deeper emotion she couldn't name. "You understand this could be dangerous for you as well?" "Yes." His hand reached out, fingers brushing hers briefly. "Then we will face them together." The patrol consisted of 8 soldiers led by a lieutenant with a pinched face and cold eyes. They rode into the camp with hands on weapons, surveying the scene with obvious suspicion. Delilah stood beside Takoda, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "This is an illegal encampment," the lieutenant announced without preamble. "All Apache are required to be on the reservation at Fort Apache." Takoda stepped forward, his posture non-threatening but dignified. We have permission from Indian Agent Harrison to hunt in this region during summer months. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed. I have no record of such permission. Perhaps you should consult with Agent Harrison before making accusations, Delilah interjected, stepping forward. 8 pairs of eyes swiveled to her, registering her presence for the first time. Ma'am, the lieutenant said, his tone shifting from hostile to concerned. Are you being held against your will? Absolutely not, Delilah replied firmly. My wagon broke down yesterday. These people offered assistance, repaired my wheel, and provided food and shelter. She gestured to her wagon, now fully loaded and ready for departure. I would have died of thirst if not for their generosity. The lieutenant dismounted, approaching Delilah while keeping a wary eye on Takoda and the other Apache men who had remained in the camp. Miss Sutton, Delilah Sutton, I have a homestead claim 10 miles south of here. Recognition flickered in the officer's eyes. The Sutton place? Your brother was Thomas Sutton. Yes. Delilah was surprised by the connection. I knew him briefly. Good man. The lieutenant's expression softened marginally. He spoke of a sister joining him. This unexpected link to her brother momentarily robbed Delilah of words. She nodded, blinking back sudden tears. The lieutenant lowered his voice. Miss Sutton, these people may have helped you, but they're still Apache. There have been raids on settlements 30 miles east of here. Not by this band, she replied firmly. They have been here, growing crops and hunting legally. The lieutenant seemed conflicted, glancing between Delilah and Takoda. Finally, he sighed. I'll need to verify this permission with Agent Harrison. Until then, he hesitated. I won't order an immediate removal, but my patrol will return in 3 days. If there's no confirmation of authorization by then, everyone here must report to the reservation. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was better than immediate confrontation. Takoda nodded his agreement, though tension remained in his shoulders. After the soldiers departed, relief washed through the camp. Women and children returned from hiding, eyeing Delilah with new appreciation. You should not have done that, Takoda said quietly as they walked toward her wagon. Now they know your name, your connection to this place. Would you have preferred I leave you to face them alone? She challenged. A small smile touched his lips. No, but I worry for your safety. I can take care of myself, she replied automatically, then paused. Though I'm beginning to see that sometimes accepting help doesn't mean surrendering independence. Takoda's dark eyes studied her face. That is a difficult lesson for proud people to learn. We are both proud people, I think. His smile widened. Yes, perhaps that is why we understand each other. As Delilah prepared to depart, she found herself reluctant to leave. Something had shifted during her brief stay, a crack in the armor she had built around herself since her brother's death. Will you be able to prove you have permission to be here? She asked as Takoda helped her onto the wagon seat. The paper exists, but whether Agent Harrison will acknowledge it. He shrugged. Officials often forget what is inconvenient to remember. Concern furrowed Delilah's brow. What will you do if they force you to the reservation? Survive. His hand rested briefly on hers. As we always have. The simple touch sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. Perhaps I could speak with the agent as well. Another voice might help. You would do this? Takoda seemed surprised. You helped me. I help you. She kept her tone matter of fact, though her racing heart belied her casual manner. That's how neighbors should behave, isn't it? Neighbors, he repeated, as if tasting the word. Yes, I suppose we are that. Delilah hesitated, then acted on impulse. My farm is isolated, but I have good water and growing fields. If things become difficult here, there is space enough for people who need temporary shelter. The offer hung between them, more significant than either acknowledged. It was an open door, a hand extended, a challenge to both their instincts for self-reliance. Takoda's expression softened. Thank you, Delilah Sutton. I will remember. As she drove away, Delilah found herself looking back more than once at the figure standing tall against the horizon. For the first time since her brother's death, the prospect of returning to an empty homestead filled her with a nameless yearning she was not yet ready to examine. 2 weeks passed, filled with the constant work of maintaining her small farm. Delilah repaired fences, tended crops, milked her cow, and collected eggs from her small flock of chickens. The routine was familiar, but now felt somehow hollow. Her thoughts returned often to the Apache camp, to the sense of community she had witnessed there, and to Takoda's perceptive gaze that seemed to see past her carefully constructed defenses. When hoofbeats approached her cabin late one afternoon, Delilah grabbed her rifle from beside the door, a habit of frontier life. She stepped onto the porch, shielding her eyes against the setting sun, and felt her heart leap when she recognized the rider. Takoda dismounted gracefully, leading his horse to the water trough before approaching. He looked tired, dust coating his clothes and lining the contours of his face. "The soldiers returned?" she asked, already knowing the answer from his expression. He nodded. "Agent Harrison claims he never gave permission for our camp." "That's outrageous." Delilah set her rifle aside. "Did they force everyone to the reservation?" "Most went," he confirmed, his voice heavy. "I came to warn you. The lieutenant remembered your interference. He suggested to others that you might be an Indian sympathizer. It could create difficulties for you." Concern flashed through her, not for herself, but for him. "You risked coming here to tell me this." A small smile touched his lips. "I thought neighbors should help each other." The echo of her own words warmed her despite the seriousness of the situation. "Where will you go?" "There are hidden places in the mountains where small groups can survive undetected." He hesitated. "But I did not come only to warn you. Some of our elders are too frail for the journey to those hideaways. The reservation would be their death." Understanding dawned. "How many?" "3 elders, 2 mothers with young children." His eyes held hers. "I would not ask if there was another way." Without hesitation, Delilah nodded. "Bring them. My barn is solid and dry. It's not much, but it's better than the reservation if conditions are as bad as you say." Relief washed over Takoda's features. "They will come tonight, traveling separately to avoid notice." He reached for her hand, his grip warm and strong. "Thank you, Delilah Sutton. Not many would take such risk for strangers." "They're not strangers," she replied softly. "They're your people, which makes them my concern." Something shifted in his gaze, a recognition of the significance of her words. "Be careful with such statements. They might make me believe things I should not." Before she could respond to the undercurrent in his voice, he had mounted his horse and disappeared into the gathering dusk, leaving Delilah to wonder at the rapid beating of her heart and the strange sense of anticipation that had replaced her usual solitary resignation. The arrivals came separately throughout the night. First an elderly man supported by a young woman with 2 small children, then 2 older women helping each other along, and finally a young mother carrying a baby no more than a few months old. Delilah settled them in the barn, bringing blankets, water, and food. The elderly man, who spoke halting English, grasped her hand with surprising strength. "Takoda says you brave woman." He right. His simple approval warmed her more than it should have. "Will he return?" "When safe. He watches reservation, helps others escape if possible." Worry gnawed at her. The penalty for Apache found off the reservation without permission was harsh: imprisonment at best, summary execution at worst if they were deemed hostile. For 3 days, Delilah maintained her normal routines while secretly caring for her guests. The women helped with chores when they could do so unseen from the road. The children remained quiet, their behavior reflecting an understanding of danger beyond their years. On the 4th morning, Delilah woke to the sound of approaching horses, multiple riders, moving fast. She barely had time to throw on a dress and rush to the barn, warning her guests to hide in the concealed root cellar beneath the floorboards that her brother had dug as a precaution against raiding parties. She returned to the cabin just as 5 riders thundered into her yard. 4 soldiers and a civilian she recognized as Tobias Crawford, owner of the general store in the nearest town and a man known for his vocal disdain for all native peoples. "Miss Sutton," the sergeant in charge called out, dismounting. "We need to speak with you." Delilah stepped onto her porch, forcing her expression into one of mild confusion. "Good morning, Sergeant. What brings the army to my door?" "Information suggests you might be harboring Apache fugitives from the reservation." The sergeant's tone was professional but firm. "Mr. Crawford here reports seeing smoke from your chimney at unusual hours and movement around your property at night." Delilah silently cursed the storekeeper, whose homestead lay 2 miles east. She hadn't realized he could observe her property from his land. "I keep irregular hours, Sergeant. A woman alone must often work after dark to maintain a farm this size." She gestured to the fields beyond the house. "As for smoke, I bake bread in the evening when it's cooler. Crawford stepped forward, his thin face pinched with suspicion. 3 nights in a row I've seen movement between your barn and house. More than one person. Perhaps you saw me carrying supplies or tending to my animals, Delilah suggested, struggling to keep her voice level. Or perhaps your eyes played tricks in the darkness. We'll need to search your property, Miss Sutton, the sergeant stated flatly. Delilah knew refusal would only confirm their suspicions. Of course, though I'd appreciate if you'd be careful around my chicken coop. The hens are laying well, and I'd hate to have them disturbed. The search was thorough and tense. Soldiers checked the cabin first, then moved to the barn. Delilah followed, her heart thundering in her chest as they moved across the floorboards concealing the hidden cellar. One soldier remarked on the fresh hay scattered across the floor. I refreshed the bedding for my cow yesterday, Delilah explained, praying her voice sounded natural. Crawford scowled, clearly disappointed as the search revealed nothing. Check the well house, he suggested. And that storage shed. As the soldiers moved toward the other outbuildings, a soft cry, barely audible, came from beneath the floorboards. The baby, Delilah realized with horror. The sergeant paused, turning back toward the barn. Did you hear that? My stomach, Delilah said quickly, placing a hand on her midsection. I haven't had breakfast yet. It's protesting the early disturbance. The sergeant looked skeptical but nodded toward the door. Let's check the remaining buildings. As they exited, Delilah caught Crawford casting one last suspicious glance at the barn floor. Fear clutched at her heart. If they returned for a second, more detailed search. The rest of the inspection proved fruitless, much to Crawford's obvious disappointment. As the soldiers prepared to leave, he lingered, his gaze calculating. You're making a mistake, Miss Sutton, getting involved with Indians. His voice was low, meant for her ears alone. People talk. A woman alone already raises questions about her character. Add Apache sympathies. He shrugged meaningfully. Anger flared hot and sudden in Delilah's chest. Is that a threat, Mr. Crawford? A friendly warning. This territory is changing. Law and civilization are coming. Those who stand against progress, or with savages, will find themselves swept aside. His thin smile never reached his eyes. Think about your future. After they departed, Delilah leaned against the porch post, trembling with reaction. Crawford's veiled threat echoed in her mind, raising uncomfortable realities about her vulnerable position. A single woman could lose her claim on flimsy pretexts if powerful men in the community turned against her. Yet when she went to the barn and helped her guests emerge from their hiding place, the gratitude in their eyes reinforced her conviction that she had made the right choice. That night, as she kept watch from her porch, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Takoda approached silently, his expression grave as she related the day's events. Crawford will return, he said simply. Men like him see native people as obstacles to be removed, not humans to be respected. I'm not afraid of Tobias Crawford, Delilah insisted, though they both recognized the half-truth. Takoda studied her face in the moonlight. You should be. He has influence with the territorial officials. He could challenge your homestead claim. The possibility had already occurred to her. What would you have me do? Turn your people away? I can't do that. No, you cannot change who you are. His voice softened. It is one of the things I most admire about you. The simple declaration warmed her more than it should have. In the weeks since their first meeting, something had grown between them, a connection that transcended their different backgrounds, a mutual recognition of kindred spirits. We must move the elders and children, Takoda continued. I have found a place in the high country where they will be safe for now. Tomorrow night. It is not safe for them to remain here, nor for you if they are discovered. Delilah nodded, acknowledging the reality of their situation. And you? Where will you go? Takoda's expression grew distant. I must continue helping others leave the reservation. Conditions there worsen each week. Disease spreads in the crowded conditions and the food. He shook his head. It is not fit for animals, let alone humans. Impulsively, Delilah reached for his hand. Be careful. Crawford has the sergeant's ear, and they'll be watching for any Apache away from the reservation. His fingers intertwined with hers, the touch sending warmth spiraling through her. I have survived 26 years in this territory, Delilah Sutton. I will survive a few more. You'd better, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not finished learning from you yet." In the silver moonlight, with the desert spread around them like a sleeping giant, Takoda's gaze held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. For one suspended moment, Delilah thought he might close the distance between them. Instead, he gently squeezed her hand before releasing it. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." As he melted back into the darkness, Delilah remained on the porch, her hand still warm from his touch, her heart beating a rhythm unfamiliar, yet somehow right. The next evening brought a dust storm rolling in from the west, the air turning to a hazy orange as the sun set. Delilah helped her guests prepare for their journey, packing what food she could spare and filling canteens with fresh water. The timing of the storm was fortunate. It would cover their tracks and make pursuit difficult. When Takoda arrived with 2 other men, leading pack horses, Delilah felt both relief and a strange reluctance. These people had become more than refugees to her in their short stay. They had become friends, filling her lonely homestead with life and purpose. The elderly man who spoke English clasped her hands in both of his. "You have good heart, Delilah Sutton. Our stories will remember you." The young mother with the infant pressed a small beaded pouch into Delilah's palm. "Protection," she said in halting English. "Keep safe." As the small group prepared to depart, Takoda approached Delilah, his expression grave. "Crawford returned to town claiming he found evidence of Apache presence on your land. The sergeant dismissed him for now, but he is persistent." Fear and defiance warred within her. "Let him come. He'll find nothing. He will find ways to make trouble for you." Takoda's concern was evident. "Perhaps you should consider selling your claim, moving to a larger settlement where you would have protection." "This land is all I have left of my brother," Delilah replied firmly. "I won't be driven from it by threats." Admiration flickered in Takoda's eyes. "You are as stubborn as any Apache warrior. I'll take that as high praise." A smile touched his lips, though concern still shadowed his expression. "I will return when I can, to ensure you are safe. I'll hold you to that promise." As the group disappeared into the swirling dust, Delilah felt their departure like a physical pain. The homestead would feel emptier now, the silence more profound after days of whispered conversations and children's muffled laughter. More troubling was the ache she felt watching Takoda ride away. In the short time since their first meeting, he had become important to her in ways she wasn't ready to examine too closely. His wisdom, his quiet strength, his deep connection to the land they both loved, all had worked their way past defenses she thought impenetrable. The next 2 weeks passed in uneasy tension. Delilah maintained her normal routines, traveling to town for supplies despite the whispers and sideways glances that followed her through the streets. Crawford had clearly been spreading rumors, though no one confronted her directly. She was returning from one such trip, her wagon loaded with seed for fall planting, when she spotted smoke on the horizon, black smoke, too much for a cooking fire, rising from the direction of her homestead. Fear clutched at her heart as she urged her horses to greater speed. Cresting the final rise before her property, Delilah's worst fears were confirmed. Her barn was engulfed in flames, the fire already spreading to the nearby chicken coop. As she watched in horror, the roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. Delilah drove the wagon directly to the well, grabbing buckets before the wheels had fully stopped. Though she knew the barn was lost, she might save her cabin if she worked quickly enough. For an hour she fought the flames alone, her arms aching, lungs burning from smoke, tears evaporating in the heat before they could fall. When hoofbeats approached, she barely had strength to look up. 3 riders appeared, the sergeant and 2 soldiers from the previous search. "Miss Sutton." The sergeant dismounted quickly, taking in the devastation. "What happened here?" "I don't know," she managed between coughs. "I was in town. Came back to find." She gestured helplessly at the smoldering ruins. The soldiers joined her bucket line without being asked, their efforts eventually containing the fire before it reached the cabin. As dusk fell, the sergeant examined the charred remains of the barn with a grim expression. "This was deliberate," he said finally. "Someone poured coal oil along the south wall." Delilah sank onto a stump, exhaustion and shock overwhelming her. "Crawford," she whispered. The sergeant's expression hardened. "You believe Tobias Crawford did this?" "He threatened me. Said people who sympathized with Indians would be swept aside." She looked up at the soldier. "He thought I was harboring Apache." I wasn't, but he didn't believe me. The sergeant removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. That's a serious accusation, Miss Sutton. Crawford is an influential man in the territory. I know what I know, Sergeant. Who else would do this? The soldier sighed heavily. I'll make inquiries, but without witnesses. He let the sentence hang unfinished. They both understood the reality. Her word against Crawford's would hold little weight in territorial courts. Will you be safe here tonight? We can escort you to town. Delilah shook her head. This is my home. I won't be driven from it. After the soldiers departed, promising to send word when their investigation concluded, Delilah sat on her porch steps as full darkness descended. The acrid smell of smoke hung in the air, a reminder of how quickly security could be destroyed. For the first time since her brother's death, she allowed herself to weep openly, for the loss, for the injustice, for the hatred that could drive a man to destroy another's livelihood. Delilah. The soft voice startled her. Takoda emerged from the shadows, his expression anguished as he took in the destruction. I saw the smoke from the hills, he explained, kneeling beside her. Who did this? Through her tears, she told him of Crawford's threats and her suspicions. Takoda's face hardened with each word, his hands clenching into fists. He will pay for this, he said when she finished, his voice dangerously quiet. Alarm shot through her. No. Violence will only confirm everything he believes about your people. It would give the army reason to hunt you down. Takoda looked away, jaw tight with suppressed anger. Then what justice is there? I don't know, she admitted. But I won't have you risking your life for revenge. Too many people depend on you. His gaze returned to her face, his anger softening into something more complex. And what of you, Delilah Sutton? Who do you depend on? The question struck at the heart of beliefs she had held since childhood, that dependency was weakness, that needing others only led to disappointment. Yet here, in the aftermath of destruction, those beliefs felt hollow. I thought I needed no one, she whispered. I was wrong. Takoda reached out, his fingertips brushing away a tear from her cheek. The gentle touch broke something inside her, the final wall she had built around her heart. Stay, she said, the word emerging as barely more than a breath. Not forever, just tonight. I don't want to be alone with the smell of smoke and ashes. His expression softened, understanding, and something deeper reflected in his eyes. I will stay. They sat together on her porch until the moon rose high, speaking little but drawing comfort from each other's presence. When exhaustion finally overwhelmed her, Delilah found herself leaning against Takoda's shoulder, his arm around her providing warmth against the desert night's chill. You should rest, he murmured against her hair. She nodded, too tired to argue, but unwilling to break their connection. There's a bedroll in the cabin. You can sleep on the porch if you prefer, or... The unspoken alternative hung between them, fraught with implications neither was ready to voice. The porch will be fine, Takoda said gently. I am accustomed to sleeping under the stars. Relief and an odd disappointment mingled in her response. Of course. As she rose to enter the cabin, his hand caught hers. Delilah. The way he spoke her name held more meaning than any elaborate declaration could have. What grows between us, it is not simple. No, she agreed softly. It isn't simple at all. His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. The world will not make it easy. The world has never made anything easy for either of us, she replied with a small smile. Why should this be different? The answering warmth in his eyes stayed with her as she finally sought her bed, exhaustion claiming her despite the tumult of emotions stirring in her heart. Morning brought new challenges. Without the barn, Delilah had nowhere to store harvested crops or shelter her animals. The chickens that had survived the fire needed a new coop. Her cow would require milking twice daily with no protected place to keep her. As she surveyed the damage in daylight, the task of rebuilding seemed overwhelming. Alone, it would take months to restore what had been destroyed, months she didn't have with winter approaching. Takoda joined her, his face grave as he examined the charred remains. Your animals? The cow and horse were in the pasture. I lost the chickens, my stored grain, and all my tools. She kicked at a blackened timber. It will take everything I have to rebuild before winter. He was quiet for a long moment. Or you could leave. Start fresh elsewhere, away from men like Crawford. The suggestion sparked immediate resistance. And let him win. Let him drive me from land that rightfully belongs to me. She shook her head fiercely. No, I won't give him that satisfaction. Takoda studied her face, a smile slowly forming. I knew that would be your answer. Then why suggest it? To be certain your heart is truly committed to this place. He gestured toward the burned barn. Because if it is, I can help you rebuild. Hope fluttered in her chest. You would do that? Not alone. His expression grew serious. There are others, men from my band who have left the reservation, women whose husbands were killed or imprisoned. They hide in the hills, surviving on what they can hunt or gather, always moving to avoid soldiers. Understanding dawned. You want to bring them here? They need a safe place. You need help rebuilding. His eyes held her steadily. It could benefit both. The proposal was both practical and dangerous. Harboring Apache off the reservation was illegal. If discovered, she could lose her land, face imprisonment, or worse. Yet the alternative, struggling alone, vulnerable to further attacks from Crawford or others like him, seemed equally perilous. How many? She asked finally. 8 adults, 3 children. They would build shelters in the wooded area behind your property, out of sight from the road. In return, they would help rebuild your barn, tend your crops, guard against further attacks. Delilah considered the risks, weighing them against her dwindling options. If they're discovered here, then we face the consequences together, Takoda finished for her. But they are skilled at remaining hidden when necessary. The decision should have required more deliberation, more careful weighing of potential outcomes. Instead, Delilah found certainty rising within her, a recognition that the path forward, though fraught with danger, was also right. Bring them, she said simply. We'll find a way to make it work. The relief and gratitude in Takoda's expression confirmed her choice. He reached for her hands, clasping them between his own. You continue to surprise me, Delilah Sutton. I continue to surprise myself, she admitted with a small smile. My brother would say I've lost my mind. Or perhaps you have found your heart. The words hung between them, laden with meaning neither was quite ready to fully acknowledge. Delilah felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze, but didn't look away. Perhaps I have. Over the next week, Takoda's people arrived in small groups, always under cover of darkness. They established a hidden camp in the dense woodland that bordered the northern edge of Delilah's property, building shelters that blended with the natural landscape so effectively they were nearly invisible from 20 paces away. Work on the new barn began immediately. Unlike the original structure, this one was partially set into a hillside, making it less visible from the road and more protected from the elements. The design incorporated techniques Delilah had never seen. Ventilation systems that would keep the interior cool in summer and warm in winter, storage areas for grain that would deter rodents, and a hidden cellar accessible only through a cleverly disguised trapdoor. Your people are remarkable builders, she commented to Takoda as they worked side by side setting roof beams. He smiled, passing her a length of rope to secure a joint. We have always adapted to our environment. When you cannot depend on permanence, you learn to build quickly and well. The observation carried a poignancy that caught at Delilah's heart. These people had been forced from their ancestral lands repeatedly, each new beginning marked by loss yet approached with remarkable resilience. The women from Takoda's band taught Delilah methods of food preservation she had never encountered, showing her how to dry meat and fruits in ways that maintained their flavor and nutritional value through winter. Children helped gather wild plants with medicinal properties, explaining their uses with the seriousness of students reciting important lessons. In return, Delilah shared her knowledge of vegetable gardening, animal husbandry, and English reading and writing. The exchange of skills became a bridge between cultures, building mutual respect and deepening connections. Most evenings, they gathered around a small, sheltered fire, sharing food and stories. Delilah found herself laughing more than she had in years, the weight of isolation lifting as she was embraced by this makeshift community. And always, there was Takoda, working alongside her during the day, his quiet strength a constant presence, sitting beside her in the evenings, translating stories, or simply existing in comfortable silence. The connection between them deepened with each passing day, evolving into something neither had words to define, but both increasingly treasured. Autumn progressed, the days growing shorter, the nights cooler. The new barn neared completion, sturdier and more practical than its predecessor. Crops were harvested and stored, preparations for winter well underway. Their fragile peace was shattered one crisp October morning when Delilah spotted dust on the horizon, riders approaching fast from the direction of town. Through her spyglass, she recognized the sergeant leading a group of 6 soldiers. "Riders coming," she called toward the hidden camp. "Soldiers, everyone hide quickly." The response was immediate. Within minutes, no trace remained of the Apache presence. Tools disappeared. Children were whisked into hiding places. Even footprints were swiftly brushed away. Takoda appeared at her side, his expression grim. "I will remain. If they have come for someone, better it be only me." "No," Delilah argued fiercely. "If they take you, they'll send you to prison, not the reservation. I won't let that happen. And I won't let you face them alone." His hand caught hers briefly. "Trust me, Delilah." Before she could argue further, the riders thundered into the yard. The sergeant dismounted first, his expression unreadable as he approached. "Miss Sutton," he greeted her with a nod. "I see you've been rebuilding." "Yes." Delilah forced her voice to remain steady. "Neighbors helped." The sergeant's gaze shifted to Takoda, recognition dawning. "You're Takoda Cochise, from the band that was camped near Willow Creek." Takoda nodded, his posture relaxed but alert. "I am. You're supposed to be on the reservation. Many places I am supposed to be. Few where I choose to be." Takoda's calm response carried no challenge, merely stated fact. The sergeant sighed heavily. "Miss Sutton, are you aware harboring Indians off the reservation is a federal offense?" Fear clutched at Delilah's heart, but she kept her chin high. "I'm aware that when my barn burned, the only people who offered help were those society considers savages. I'm aware that Christian charity seems in short supply among those who claim civilization." She gestured toward the partially completed barn. "And I'm aware I wouldn't have survived the coming winter without this work being done." The sergeant removed his hat, running a hand through his graying hair. "Ma'am, I understand your situation, but the law is clear." "The law," Takoda interjected quietly, "was written by those who have never known hunger or homelessness, by men who have never watched their children die from diseases brought by others, or seen their elders wither away in places not fit for animals." Something shifted in the sergeant's expression, a flicker of discomfort, perhaps even guilt. He glanced at his men, then back to Delilah and Takoda. "We came because Tobias Crawford has filed a formal complaint. Claims there's an Apache encampment on your land, Miss Sutton." He looked pointedly around the seemingly empty property. "I don't see evidence of that." Hope stirred in Delilah's chest. "Mr. Crawford has made his hostility toward me quite clear, Sergeant. First with threats, then by burning my barn. You have proof of that accusation?" "Only what I know in my heart to be true." The sergeant nodded slowly. "Crawford's been asking questions in town. About you, Miss Sutton. About your relationship with the Apache." His gaze shifted meaningfully to Takoda. "People are talking." The implication was clear. Whatever existed between her and Takoda had not gone unnoticed, and in the territories, such connections were viewed with suspicion at best, open hostility at worst. "I don't concern myself with gossip," Delilah replied, though her cheeks warmed. "Perhaps you should." The sergeant's tone softened. "Frontier towns can be unforgiving places for those who defy convention." He turned to Takoda. "And the Army has orders regarding Apache off the reservation." Takoda met his gaze steadily. "Will you follow those orders today, Sergeant?" A long moment of tension stretched between them. Finally, the sergeant replaced his hat. "I see no encampment here. Just a woman rebuilding after a fire, with help from a friend." He mounted his horse. "But I can't guarantee Crawford won't return with territorial marshals next time. And they won't be so selective in what they observe." With that warning, he signaled his men, and they rode away, leaving Delilah and Takoda standing in the yard, the reprieve unexpected but clearly temporary. "He knows," Delilah whispered once the dust had settled. "Yes, but he chose not to see." Takoda's expression was thoughtful. "Not all white men believe as Crawford does, but enough do to make this dangerous for everyone." She turned to face him fully. "What do we do now?" Before Takoda could answer, the hidden Apache emerged from their concealment, gathering around them. The oldest man spoke first, his words translated by a younger woman. "He says we must leave," she explained. "The soldiers will return, or worse men will come." Protests rose from Delilah and several others, but Takoda raised a hand for silence. "The elder is right," he said, his voice heavy with reluctance. "We have nearly finished the barn. The winter stores are prepared. Our continued presence puts Delilah at risk." The truth of his words hung heavy in the air. Delilah wanted to argue, but knew he was right. Crawford's vendetta against her had now expanded to include her association with the Apache. He wouldn't rest until he found a way to punish her for what he perceived as betrayal of her race. "Where will you go?" she asked, her voice catching. "North, into the mountains," Takoda replied. "There are caves the white men don't know, valleys where small bands can survive the winter undetected." The practical part of Delilah understood the necessity. The emotional part rebelled against the separation, not just from the community that had formed around her homestead, but specifically from Takoda, whose presence had become essential to her in ways she was only beginning to fully comprehend. When the single word contained all her sorrow. "Tonight, under darkness." His eyes held hers, conveying what words could not. "It is safer this way." The day passed in a flurry of preparation. Food was divided, supplies packed, final touches added to the barn to ensure it would withstand winter storms. Through it all, Delilah moved as if in a dream, her heart growing heavier with each passing hour. As dusk approached, the Apache gathered their few belongings, preparing for the journey ahead. Children who had become precious to Delilah hugged her fiercely before being led away by parents and elders. Women who had worked beside her pressed small gifts into her hands: a beaded bracelet, a woven pouch of healing herbs, a carved wooden bird. When the others had moved toward the tree line to begin their journey, Takoda remained, standing with Delilah in the deepening twilight. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into a leather pouch at his waist. He withdrew a small object wrapped in soft deerskin. Unwrapping it, Delilah found a beautifully carved pendant, a bird in flight, created from a piece of turquoise set in silver. "It belonged to my mother," Takoda explained as he placed it in her palm. She said it represented freedom, the ability to rise above earthly troubles and see the greater path. Tears filled Delilah's eyes. "I can't accept something so precious." "You must." His fingers closed hers around the pendant. "To remind you that what matters most cannot be confined by borders drawn on maps or laws written by those who do not understand love." The word hung between them, acknowledged at last. Love. What else could define the connection that had grown between them? A bridge across cultures, histories, and the prejudices that sought to keep them apart. "I don't want you to go," Delilah whispered, the admission tearing from her heart. Takoda stepped closer, his hand rising to cup her cheek. "Nor do I wish to leave, but to stay would endanger you further. When will I see you again?" "When spring comes to the mountains and the snows retreat." His thumb brushed away a tear from her cheek. "If you still wish it then." "I will wish it every day until then," she replied, her voice breaking. "Every single day." In the fading light, with the scent of pine and sage surrounding them, Takoda lowered his head until his forehead rested against hers. The gesture was both tender and reverent, an intimacy that transcended physical passion to touch something deeper. "Then I will return," he promised softly. "For in you, Delilah Sutton, I have found what I never thought to find, a heart that sees beyond differences to the truth of who I am." Unable to contain her emotion any longer, Delilah closed the remaining distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that held all the longing, fear, and hope that words could not express. Gentle at first, then deepening as the barriers between them finally dissolved completely. When they parted, breathless and transformed, Takoda traced the contours of her face with tender fingers, as if memorizing every detail. "Carry my heart with you," Delilah whispered. "Keep it safe until you return. And you keep mine." He stepped back reluctantly. "Remember what I told you when we first met? The strongest act is not to stand alone, but to allow others to stand beside you. I remember everything you've taught me." She managed a tremulous smile. "Now go, before I lose my courage and beg you to stay regardless of the consequences." With a final touch of his hand against hers, Takoda turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the forest where his people waited. Delilah stood watching long after they had gone, the pendant clutched in her hand, her heart divided between the pain of separation and the newfound certainty that love, once discovered, could not be extinguished by distance or circumstance. Winter descended on the Arizona Territory with unusual harshness that year. Snow blanketed the higher elevations, and even Delilah's relatively low-lying homestead saw freezing temperatures that cracked the earth and glazed the creek with ice. She endured the isolation by keeping busy, tending animals in the new barn, mending clothes, reading the few books she possessed until their pages grew soft from handling. At night, she held Takoda's pendant, wondering if he was warm enough in the mountain caves, if his people had sufficient food, if he thought of her as often as she thought of him. Trips to town became exercises in restraint. Crawford watched her with open hostility whenever their paths crossed, whispering to companions who then cast sidelong glances in her direction. The general store owner's wife refused to serve her until other customers had been helped, regardless of when Delilah arrived. Yet there were small kindnesses too. The schoolteacher slipped extra newspapers into her purchases. The blacksmith repaired her wagon wheel without charge, muttering that not everyone agrees with Crawford's notions. The sergeant from the patrol nodded respectfully when he encountered her, a silent acknowledgement of shared secrets. As winter loosened its grip and the first tentative signs of spring appeared, Delilah found herself watching the northern horizon constantly, hoping for a glimpse of the one face that had come to mean everything to her. The Apache had taught her to recognize the signs of coming change, which birds returned first, how the buds on certain plants preceded others, the changing smell of the earth as it warmed. Each indicator heightened her anticipation, each passing day without Takoda's return stretching her patience. When Crawford appeared at her property one mild March afternoon, Delilah's first thought was that he had somehow intercepted Takoda's return. Her hand instinctively went to the knife she now kept at her belt. Another lesson learned from her Apache friends. Miss Sutton. He removed his hat with exaggerated politeness, though his eyes remained cold. You're looking well, considering the winter we've had. What do you want, Mr. Crawford? She remained on her porch, unwilling to invite him closer. I've come with a proposition. He gestured broadly at her property. This land has good water, decent soil. My holdings adjoin yours to the east. Together, they'd make an impressive ranch. Understanding dawned slowly. Are you offering to buy my property? I'm offering more than that. His thin smile did not reach his eyes. I'm offering marriage. Shock rendered Delilah momentarily speechless. Of all possible scenarios, this was one she had never anticipated. Marriage, she repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. It makes practical sense. Crawford advanced a few steps. A woman alone has limited prospects out here. Together, we could build something substantial. My influence in town would ensure you're treated with proper respect. The irony of this last statement, coming from the man who had orchestrated her ostracism, was not lost on Delilah. And what about my associations? The ones you've been so vocal about condemning. Crawford waved a dismissive hand. Youthful foolishness. Once you're my wife, people will forget such indiscretions. Anger flared hot and sudden in Delilah's chest. Indiscretions? Is that what you call burning my barn? Threatening me? Spreading lies about me throughout the territory? I never said, you never needed to say it directly. Your actions spoke clearly enough. She straightened her spine, looking him directly in the eye. Mr. Crawford, I would rather live alone for the rest of my days than spend 1 hour as your wife. His expression hardened. You're making a mistake. No one else will have you now, not with your reputation. Then I will remain unmarried and content with my choice. Crawford replaced his hat, his movements deliberate. I try to be reasonable, Miss Sutton. Remember that in the days ahead. Is that another threat? A prediction. The territorial governor has taken an interest in reports of Apache moving freely through settled areas. Martial law may be declared in districts where sympathy for hostiles is found. His smile was cold. I wonder how your homestead claim would fare under such scrutiny. As he mounted his horse and rode away, Delilah remained on the porch, fear and defiance warring within her. Crawford's threat was not idle. She had heard rumors of increased military activity, of new policies being considered to force all Apache onto reservations permanently. If Takoda returned now, he would face greater danger than ever before. Yet the thought of never seeing him again was unbearable. Night fell with no resolution to her dilemma. Delilah sat on her porch, watching stars emerge in the clear spring sky, the pendant warm in her palm from constant handling. The soft sound of approaching footsteps barely registered until a familiar voice spoke her name. Delilah. She stood so quickly her chair toppled backward. There, emerging from the shadows like a manifestation of her thoughts, stood Takoda. Thinner than when she last saw him, with new lines etching his face, but gloriously, wonderfully present. Without conscious thought, Delilah flew down the steps and across the yard, throwing herself into his arms with such force that he staggered back a step before steadying them both. "You came back," she whispered against his chest, tears flowing freely. "You really came back." His arms tightened around her. "I promised I would." For several minutes, they simply held each other, reaffirming through touch what words could not adequately express, that despite separation, danger, and cultural divides, what had grown between them remained true and vital. When they finally drew apart enough to see each other's faces, Takoda brushed tears from her cheeks with gentle fingers. "You wear my mother's pendant," he observed, his voice soft with pleasure. Delilah touched the turquoise bird that hung at her throat. "Every day, it helped me feel close to you when the winter seemed endless." Leading him to the porch, she recounted Crawford's visit and threats, her worry evident. Takoda listened gravely, his expression darkening. "He speaks the truth about increased military activity," he confirmed. "2 bands were forced back to the reservation last month. Those who resisted." He left the sentence unfinished, but Delilah understood the implication. "What of your people? The ones who wintered in the mountains?" "Most have gone north, seeking to join relatives among tribes still free in unsettled territories." Pain flickered across his features. "The old ways are ending, Delilah. Even I must acknowledge this truth." "And you? What will you do?" Takoda took her hands in his gaze direct and unwavering. "That depends on you." "On me. I have come to ask if you would journey with me. North, beyond the reach of men like Crawford, to places where the land remains as it has always been, where we might build a life together without fear." The proposal, for that was what it was, in essence, took her breath away. Leave everything she had worked for, the land that connected her to her brother's memory, to follow this man into an uncertain future? What would such a life look like, she asked, needing to understand fully what he offered. Different from what either of us has known. Neither fully Apache nor white, but something new. His thumbs traced patterns on her palms. "We would find others like us. People who choose to determine their own path rather than follow trails blazed by hatred and fear." The vision he painted was both terrifying and exhilarating. A leap into the unknown with only their love and determination as security. "Or," he continued, seeing her hesitation, "we could remain here and fight for what is yours. But the cost may be high, Delilah. Crawford will not rest until he has what he wants." She knew this to be true. The storekeeper's ambition was matched only by his capacity for cruelty. If she stayed, the conflict would only escalate, potentially endangering not just herself, but Takoda as well. Yet the thought of abandoning her land, her last connection to Thomas, created an ache in her heart. "I need time," she whispered. "To think, to decide." Of course. Takoda's understanding was evident in his gentle smile. "I will return tomorrow night. Whatever you decide, know this. My heart is yours, Delilah Sutton." It has been since the moment our eyes met across a broken wagon wheel. Their parting kiss held both the sweetness of reunion and the urgency of uncertain futures. As Takoda disappeared once more into the darkness, Delilah remained on the porch, torn between competing loyalties, to her past and to the future that beckoned. Sleep eluded her that night. She paced her small cabin, weighing options, examining emotions, seeking clarity. By dawn, exhaustion had brought a strange lucidity. She understood at last that what she feared was not leaving the land itself, but abandoning the memory of her brother and the dream they had shared. As morning light spilled across her property, Delilah visited Thomas's grave beneath the cottonwood tree behind the cabin. She knelt on the earth that held his remains, tracing the simple wooden marker with gentle fingers. "What would you tell me to do?" she asked aloud. "Stay and fight a battle I might not win? Or go with a man I love toward a future I can barely imagine?" Though no audible response came, Delilah felt a sense of peace settle over her. Thomas had always encouraged her independent spirit, her willingness to challenge conventions. You'll either change the world or drive it mad trying, he had often teased. Perhaps the truest way to honor his memory was not by clinging to a piece of land, but by living fully, bravely, and according to her own heart's wisdom. Decision made, Delilah spent the day in purposeful preparation. She gathered essential supplies, family mementos, seeds from her garden, and a small pouch of soil from Thomas's grave. The practical aspects of departure helped focus her mind away from fear and toward hope. When evening approached, she saddled her horse and secured her belongings, then sat on the porch steps to await Takoda's return. The sunset painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, a farewell gift from the land she had come to love. The sound of multiple horses approaching from the east shattered her contemplative mood. Riders, moving fast, too many for casual travelers. Alarm shot through Delilah as she grabbed her rifle and moved to the side of the cabin, seeking a better vantage point. Through the gathering dusk, she counted 6 men on horseback, Crawford at the lead, followed by 5 others she recognized from town. Not soldiers or lawmen, but ordinary citizens armed with rifles and determination. A vigilante party. Cold dread settled in Delilah's stomach. Crawford must have learned of Takoda's return somehow, perhaps spotting him on his way to her homestead the previous night. If Takoda arrived now, he would ride directly into danger. The riders dismounted in her yard, spreading out to approach the cabin from different angles. Crawford called out, his voice carrying in the still evening air. "Miss Sutton, we know you're harboring an Apache fugitive. Send him out, and we'll ensure you're treated fairly." Delilah remained silent, mind racing. If she revealed herself, they might search the property, potentially intercepting Takoda when he arrived. If she hid, they might burn the cabin to flush her out. The decision was made for her when 2 men circled behind the cabin, cutting off her retreat. One spotted her and shouted to the others, "She's here, behind the cabin." Cornered, Delilah raised her rifle. "Stay back. You have no right to be on my property." Crawford approached, his own weapon held casually but ready. "We have every right to protect our community from Indian sympathizers and the savages they harbor." His voice carried for the benefit of his companions. "The Apache who visited you last night. Where is he?" "There was no visitor," Delilah lied, keeping her rifle steady. "I've been alone since winter." "Lying won't help you, Miss Sutton. One of my men saw him approaching your property after dark." Crawford's smile was cold. "We know he'll return. All we need to do is wait." The realization that they intended to use her as bait to trap Takoda sent panic coursing through Delilah's veins. She had to warn him somehow, prevent him from riding into ambush. "Whatever quarrel you have with me, Mr. Crawford, let's settle it legally. There's no need for armed men surrounding my home. The time for legal niceties has passed." Crawford gestured to his companions. "Search the property. Every building, every possible hiding place." As the men dispersed to follow his orders, Delilah kept her rifle trained on Crawford. "This is still territorial America, not some lawless wilderness. You have no authority here. Authority grows from the barrel of a gun, Miss Sutton. A lesson your Apache friend understands well." He stepped closer. "Lower your weapon. You're outnumbered and outmatched." Delilah's finger tightened on the trigger. She could shoot him, but the consequences would be severe. Even in self-defense, killing a prominent citizen would likely see her convicted and hanged. Before she could decide, a shout came from near the tree line. "Rider approaching from the north." Crawford's expression shifted to triumphant satisfaction. "Right on schedule. Get inside the barn, all of you. We'll take him when he dismounts." Terror clutched at Delilah's heart. "No." The cry escaped before she could stop it. Crawford turned back to her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You care for him." Disgust, and something darker, jealousy, perhaps, twisted his features. "A white woman with an Apache. Worse than I thought." He grabbed her arm, the rifle barrel pressing painfully against her side. "You'll be quiet, or I'll put a bullet in you before he even dismounts." He dragged her toward the barn. "Either way, your savage dies tonight." Desperation gave Delilah strength she didn't know she possessed. Twisting violently, she brought her knee up into Crawford's groin with all the force she could muster. As he doubled over in pain, she tore free from his grasp and ran toward the approaching rider, screaming warnings into the gathering darkness. "Takoda, go back. It's a trap." A gunshot cracked the air, the bullet kicking up dirt near her feet. Delilah kept running, desperation driving her forward. She could see the rider now, still some distance away but closing rapidly. Another shot, closer this time. Crawford had recovered enough to pursue, his rage lending accuracy to his aim. Delilah felt a searing pain across her upper arm, but didn't slow. "Ambush!" she shouted again, praying Takoda would hear and retreat. Instead, he urged his horse faster, closing the distance between them with alarming speed. Delilah could see his expression now, determination mixed with fear for her safety. More shots rang out as Crawford's men emerged from hiding, realizing their ambush had been discovered. Bullets whined past as Takoda reached Delilah, extending his arm without slowing. "Take my hand," he commanded. Without hesitation, Delilah grasped his outstretched hand. With strength born of years on horseback, Takoda swung her up behind him in one fluid motion, wheeling his horse away from the gunfire. They raced toward the northern hills, Delilah clinging to Takoda's waist as bullets sought them in the deepening twilight. Behind them, Crawford bellowed orders, and horses thundered in pursuit. "You're hurt," Takoda said, feeling the warmth of blood where her arm pressed against him. "Just a graze," she replied, though the wound burned like fire. "Keep riding. They won't give up easily." For nearly an hour they pushed the horse to its limits, climbing into increasingly rugged terrain where their pursuers' unfamiliarity with the landscape gave Takoda an advantage. When they finally paused to rest the exhausted animal, the sounds of pursuit had faded. Takoda helped Delilah dismount, his concern evident as he examined her wound by moonlight. "The bullet only grazed you, but it needs cleaning." He tore a strip from his shirt, binding the injury with gentle efficiency. "Why did you not wait for me in the cabin? You would have been safer." "Crawford knew you were coming," she explained, wincing as he tightened the bandage. "They planned to ambush you when you arrived. I couldn't let that happen." His hands stilled, his eyes finding hers in the darkness. "You risked your life to warn me, as you would have done for me." The simplicity of the truth required no elaboration. Takoda's hand rose to cup her cheek, his touch infinitely tender despite the danger surrounding them. "What happens now depends on your choice, Delilah. I came tonight ready to accept whatever decision you had made, to stay and fight for your land, or to journey north with me." Delilah covered his hand with her own. "There is no choice to make anymore. Crawford will never stop hunting us now. My home, my land, they're lost to me regardless." Pain flickered across Takoda's features. "I am sorry. I know what that land meant to you. The land was important because it connected me to Thomas, to my past." She drew a deep breath. "But I understand now that honoring his memory means living fully, not clinging to pieces of earth and wood." She withdrew the small pouch of soil from her pocket. "I took this from his grave this morning, a piece of him to carry with us. The rest, the buildings, the fields, those are just things. Replaceable." "And your decision?" Before Crawford's men came. In answer, Delilah leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that conveyed more clearly than words what she had decided. When they parted, breathless and momentarily forgetful of the dangers still pursuing them, she smiled. "North. With you. Wherever that leads us." Relief and joy transformed Takoda's expression. "Then we should continue. I have horses and supplies hidden in the high country. From there, we can reach territories where Crawford's influence cannot follow." As they prepared to resume their journey, Delilah cast one last glance southward, toward the homestead that had been both her prison and her sanctuary. No regret shadowed her heart, only a curious lightness, as if in choosing love over land, she had shed a burden she hadn't realized she carried. "Ready?" Takoda asked, offering his hand to help her mount. "Ready," Delilah confirmed, accepting both his assistance and the future it represented. Together they rode into the night, leaving behind the constraints of a society that could not understand or accept the bond between them. Ahead lay uncertainty, challenge, and danger, but also the promise of a life defined not by others' expectations, but by their own courage and love. 3 years later, a small trading post in Wyoming Territory received unusual visitors. A striking couple who arrived on matched pinto horses, accompanied by a toddler with copper-brown skin and eyes the color of summer sky. The man, clearly Apache but dressed in a curious blend of native and settler clothing, spoke perfect English as he traded furs and beadwork for supplies. The woman, golden-haired and confident, carried the child on her hip with practiced ease. "You folks settled nearby?" the storekeeper inquired, curiosity overcoming caution. "We have a place in the High Valley," the woman replied, her smile revealing nothing more specific. "Unusual pairing," the storekeeper observed, unable to restrain his bluntness. "Don't see many arrangements like yours." The man and woman exchanged a glance that spoke volumes: amusement, resignation, and a deep connection that required no words to express. "The strongest act is not to stand alone," the man said finally, "but to allow others to stand beside you, even when the world believes they shouldn't," the woman added, shifting their son to her other hip. The storekeeper nodded slowly, something in their quiet dignity silencing further questions. He finished wrapping their purchases, adding an extra stick of candy with a wink for the child. As they departed, he watched them mount their horses, the woman passing the boy to his father before swinging easily into her saddle. They rode away side by side, their shadows merging in the late afternoon sun. A strange pair indeed, he thought, but there was no denying the rightness of their unity, as if two pieces of a puzzle created specifically to fit each other had finally found their place in the vast landscape of the American West.